Hi everybody, welcome to the Housechurch video for Down Week, where we have been talking this past Sunday about the Bible and answering some questions that have come up. And so for me, the big question is really, what is the Bible? And the reason why that's a big question is because questions like, is the Bible historically accurate? Is the Bible relevant for today? How do I defend the Bible? What kind of version should I look at? All of those questions that kind of come up about the Bible are basically all either asking what the Bible is or are informed by it. Because if we see the Bible as a collection of historical documents from thousands of years ago, well, that determines what we think about its relevance or what we think about what we do with it today. If we're looking at the Bible as being a collection of everything that Christians believe, that changes how we think about it in terms of how we want to defend it and how we want to explain it to other people. And so the question really boils down to, what is the Bible? And we can kind of take a look at that and then answer the other questions kind of naturally, just out of once we understand what the Bible actually is. And so that leads us to the light bulb. And my light bulb for me is in a little bit of a process. And so I want to walk that through with you. I take a look at what Jesus says about the Bible. And he says lots about the Bible, but there's a funny story, interesting story that happens in Luke chapter 24. And what happens in Luke 24 is, so Jesus has been arrested, he's been crucified, and now he's risen again. And there's these two disciples, these two followers of Jesus, who are walking down the road back home. They're visibly sad, they're upset. And Jesus shows up and asks them why they're upset. And they say, you must be the one person on the planet who doesn't know what's happening right now. And they talk about how the hope for Israel is gone. And even though they've heard stories about Jesus being resurrected and how they don't quite understand why all this is happening, and they're really sad. And what's interesting is what Jesus says to them in that moment. And let me read it for you. It's in Luke chapter 24, starting at verse 25. It says, "Then Jesus said to them, 'You foolish people, you find it so hard to believe that all the prophets wrote in the scriptures. Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering his glory?' Then Jesus took them through the writings." Listen to this. "Then Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and all the prophets, explaining from all the scriptures the things concerning himself." What's interesting there is what Jesus says that all of the Old Testament is, and that was all the Bible at that time. It's all about Jesus. So that then leads me to probably one of my favorite definitions of the Bible. And it comes from a book called the Jesus Storybook Bible. It's written by Sally Lloyd-Jones. And I want to read you her definition of what the Bible actually is. In her first chapter of the book, she talks about the Bible. She talks about whether or not it's about heroes and right ways to live, rules and that sort of thing. And this is her conclusion. She says, "The Bible is most of all a story. It's an adventure story about a young hero who comes from a faraway country to win back his lost treasure. It's a love story about a brave prince who leaves his palace, his throne, everything, to rescue the one he loves. It's like the most wonderful of fairy tales that has come true in real life. You see, the best thing about this story is it's true. There are lots of stories in the Bible, but all the stories are telling one big story. The story of how God loves his children and comes to rescue them. It takes the whole Bible to tell this story. And here's the key part. At the center of the story, there is a baby. Every story in the Bible whispers his name. He's like the missing piece of a puzzle, the piece that makes all the other pieces fit together. And suddenly you can see a beautiful picture. And this is no ordinary baby. This is the child upon whom everything would depend." Of course, she's talking here about Jesus. And so what the Bible is a book that tells us about the heart of God. It reveals the heart of God. It reveals Jesus to us. And that's what the Bible is. So for me, my light bulb moment comes when I realize that the Bible is really about Jesus. And it unveils and it shows our need for him, his care for us, the missing piece that he is to all the different stories, the work that he does, the life that he calls us to, the reality he invites us to, and the kingdom that he builds for us. That's what the Bible really is about. So then all of these questions fit into place. And then that leads us to the arrow. What do we do with this information? How do we move forward? And for me, it makes the Bible come alive because it's not a clinical book of old stories that can not make a ton of sense that I wrestle with. What this means is the Bible is revealing through story after story. It's revealing Jesus. It's showing Jesus. So in a story about a family that's all messed up and there's lots of dysfunction, like take the story of Judah and his family from the Old Testament. What you have missing there is that they're missing Jesus. He's the missing piece in that story. And yet, there's redemption that comes through that story because Judah is the ancestor of Jesus. And so you see how the work of Jesus in bringing all things to himself, you see the work of Jesus in redeeming and restoring and being part of all of the stories of the Bible, that every single story tells us something about Jesus. And so now when I wrestle with a story about, or something in the Bible that makes me uncomfortable, or I see something that maybe I don't know if I agree with the way the Bible talks about this, I'm not wrestling with pages and words. I'm wrestling with getting to know Jesus. So how do I make the Bible relevant for people around me? I introduce them to Jesus. How do I defend the Bible as a book that is relevant or that is useful for today? I show people who Jesus is. Because the Bible unveils Jesus. And at the heart of it all, you're introducing people to a person, not to a book. And so for me, that's the arrow, and that's the direction that I see this going with what the Bible is about and really what the importance of it is for us. So that's my question mark, light bulb, and arrow. And I hope you have fun discussing what yours were from the sermon and also talking around and finding things that you can do to serve our community this week. Have a great house church, everybody.